Ethan was just 10 years old when his life began to unravel. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, worked tirelessly to provide for him, but their long hours left him alone most afternoons. Ethan longed for their attention, but it was always just out of reach. Most days Ethan sits alone in his house, staring out the window, waiting for his parents to return. "I wish Mom and Dad were here. I'm so bored," he would often say to himself. Mrs. Thompson returns home late, exhausted. She barely has time to ask Ethan about his day. "Ethan, I'm sorry we're not around much. We are doing this for you, for your future," Mrs. Thompson would say. "I know, Mom. But I miss you," Ethan said, but she had already left the room. One fateful day, Mrs. Thompson realized she needed to put her son in the hands of someone to look after the child when he returned from school, since she was not always available. She then approaches their neighbor, Aunt Clara, a kind woman in her late 20s who lives alone. "Clara, would you mind looking after Ethan after school? We are so busy at the shop, and I worry about him being alone," Mrs. Thompson said. "Of course. Ethan's such a sweet boy. I'd be happy to help," Aunt Clara said, smiling. Ethan starts spending afternoons at Aunt Clara's house. She greets him with food and a warm smile. "Come on in, Ethan. How was school today?" Aunt Clara would often say. And in no time, Ethan begins to feel comfortable with Aunt Clara. She buys him toys and lets him watch cartoons. At first, Aunt Clara's care seemed like a blessing. She filled the void left by Ethan's absent parents. But soon, her kindness took a dark turn. Aunt Clara introduces Ethan to a secret game. Ethan looks confused and uncomfortable. "This game is just for us, Ethan. No one else can know about it," she whispered. Ethan reluctantly participates, but his discomfort grows. He starts avoiding Aunt Clara's house. "I don't like this game. It feels wrong," Ethan said to himself. Ethan begins wetting the bed, a sign of his distress. He tries to tell his parents, but they are too busy to listen. "Ethan, we are doing our best. You need to be strong," the mother said impatiently. "But Mom, something's wrong. I don't feel good," Ethan said with drops of tears almost running down his eyes. Ethan is at school, looking withdrawn. His teacher, Mrs. Anderson, notices his behavior and asks him to stay after class. "Ethan, is everything okay? You've been so quiet lately," Mrs. Anderson asked. Ethan hesitated for a while and then said, It's Aunt Clara. She does things to me. I don't like it." Mrs. Anderson is shocked, as she comforts Ethan and promises to help. "You're very brave for telling me, Ethan. We'll make sure you're safe," Mrs. Anderson said. Mrs. Anderson, in her wisdom, contacted Ethan's parents and the school authorities, and Aunt Clara was arrested. But the trauma lingered, shaping Ethan's future in ways no one could have predicted. Ethan's parents, now aware of what happened, try to make amends. They spend more time with him, but the damage has been done. "Ethan, we are so sorry, we weren't there for you. We'll do better, I promise," the mother said guiltily. Ethan becomes withdrawn and struggles in school. His parents try to help, but they don't fully understand the depth of his pain. Ethan's parents tried to make up for lost time, but the scars of neglect and trauma ran deep. Ethan's childhood was forever changed. As Ethan entered his teenage years, he is now in high school. He's taller and more confident, but struggles with the lingering effects of his past. He develops a crush on a classmate named Sophie, a kind and beautiful girl in his class. But the trauma from his childhood resurfaced, leading to a series of poor decisions. Ethan and Sophie often sneak off to an abandoned classroom. Things escalate, and Sophie becomes pregnant. "Ethan, I'm scared. What are we going to do?" Sophie said, crying. Ethan panicked. "I don't know, Sophie. I don't know." Matters got out of hand, and the mother of Sophie, Mrs. Carter, confronts Ethan's parents about the pregnancy. The families argue, and Sophie was sent to live with Ethan's family. "Your son has ruined my daughter's life. What are you? We'll take care of her. But this is as much her fault." Sophie's life became a nightmare as she started living. Time flies. Sophie is now 18. She then decided to leave Ethan's house and returns to her family. She starts rebuilding her life, focusing on her education, finding new friends, and slowly healing. Ethan, on the other hand, is now a young adult who struggles with his past. He joins a gang, drinks heavily, and becomes a shadow of his former self. "I've ruined everything. There's no way out," Ethan said to himself. Ethan's mother, Mrs. Thompson, tries to intervene, but he pushes her away. "Ethan, please. Let us help you," she said. "Leave me alone, Mom. You've done enough," Ethan said angrily. Ethan, now living alone, spirals further into despair. He writes a note before taking his own life. "I'm sorry to everyone I've let down. Mom, forgive me. Sophie, I'm sorry for everything," he said. His neighbors then discover Ethan's body. The town mourns his loss. Ethan's story serves as a reminder of the importance of compassion and understanding, and a call to the importance of the role of parenting in the life of children and, by extension, the next generation and leaders of the society. Train a child correctly. Save the next generation of leaders.